Okay guys, today is fly fishing. Going after little minnows on light fly rod gear. And not a lot of people do this, but it is very fun, and let's see if we get something. I'm gonna skip it over here. Alright, that's how you do it.
Ugly skip,
But it still works. Not bad. This is just fun. But yeah, if you can skip a frog underneath some stuff like that, you're bound to get some bites, because not a lot of people do this. I have to drag on really soft, just to let you guys know, because the hook that I usually put on the trailing jig, it's a really small hook. Hey, what's up guys? It's Connery from Out of Work Outdoors, and today I'm going to be answering questions that we get from the channel, and this is one that I know a couple people have asked, and a lot of people want to know or don't even know. And I've been personally asked this one by another fisherman when I'm on the water, and it kind of goes into this kind of general category of what is the difference between a spinning rod or a spinning setup versus a bait caster setup versus a fly setup. And every one of them, I'm just going to say it straight out, has its own unique purpose. And when fished during the right conditions, or the required conditions, each will excel over the other one. Okay, so there is no good, bad, right, wrong. Okay, it's really, in the end, it's really personal preference. By the way, if you're not in a tournament or if you're not fishing tournaments and things like that. Okay, so let's go over. I actually kind of made a list the last couple of days. I was kind of thinking about it during work, so I typed up a list of some of the things I wanted to cover. And some of the things I didn't want to cover is just how do they work, what differences the equipment are, the expenses, the maintenance, type of lures they use, the environmental / space requirements, what happens on the windy day, what happens during night fishing, speed during a presentation, which I think is very important, range, so how much range can you get. I even throw in body strain or endurance. Presentation is also a very important one. Sensitivity is also another important one. Pulling power and thrill of the fight. Thrill of the fight, I think, is going to be the one where, like I say, if you're not in a tournament environment where you want to catch a fish and land it the fastest, thrill of the fight is very important. So for all the guys that are like, say, weekend anglers, this is probably going to be the most important one to you. So from the list, some of the topics I just covered, let's just go to the top and come right back down to it. So how do they work? Okay, so you see all the professional bass anglers, or 95% of the times they're on a bait caster. Why is that? And I mean, you look at trout anglers, 99% of the times they're on a fly rod. And for most of the other beginners, they're on a spinning rod. Why is that? Well, let's see. In my opinion, the spinning rod is by far the easiest one to set up, to use, to explain to somebody, to put a jig on there or put any type of lure on there, and cast it out and retrieve it in, and it makes the least amount of mess, that type of stuff, and odds of you getting tangled in your own line is a lot less. So that's probably why it's the most, I would say, available, most commonly used setup out there. But it's easy too, because the way that system is designed is the lure is heavier. The lure, when you whip it out, it does all the work. The weight of the lure will bring the line out, and when the lure stops moving, the line stops moving. So it's like a really simple way to just toss something out there. It's almost like throwing a rock. Once you throw it, you forget about it. There's nothing else to worry about. Now the other one is the bait caster, and the bait caster is a little harder to explain, because depending on the lure weight and the line and the windy conditions, you have to balance like two knobs on the reel itself. So when when you cast a lure out, the spool cannot be running faster or letting out line faster than the speed of your lure. Otherwise, you'd cause that that bird's nest backlash. Some people call it professional overrun, but when that happens, it's very frustrating to kind of undo sometimes, and sometimes it'll wrap up so bad you actually end up snapping some of your lures off. So that's a bad thing. Okay, so that's how a baitcaster works. Now, on the fly fishing world, it's a completely different thing because you see these guys, they got like 30 yards of line out, and they're doing this action, right? And what they're doing is the energy is no longer in the lure. The first two, it's kind of energy in the lure. The fly rod stuff, the energy is in your line. Your line actually pulls your lure out. So that's where the biggest difference between three are. The fly fishing, it's got a real big line, so it's the heaviest line of all of them as well, and it's also the most difficult to kind of work with, because usually on the other two you can have like straight line, like straight plastic, straight braid, or anything like that. But on this one, there's backing, and then there's the fly line, and then there's the leader. Okay, so that the fly line itself is the one with the color. Okay, usually the backings is white, big braid too, and then you go to the tapered leader, which is just a leader material, sometimes fluorocarbon, and sometimes it's a mono, and it starts off big and it goes small, and it's also the most expensive line you can get. Like a 9-foot leader is probably $6, So in terms of expense, and now we get into the expense world. The fly fishing world is the hardest. I would say the most expensive to start off with, because the reels, usually entry level is already $90 for a reel. So I have some reels up there. Those are $90 reels right up in the corner. Those are the fly rods. Yeah, so I do have all of them kind of stacked up on my wall. Fly rods, spin casters, and bait casters. So the reels usually start from 90. A good reel, in my opinion, would be about $300 for a fly fishing reel. I don't fish that often in the fly fishing world, so I don't have one, but I do plan to get one later, because I know for striper fishing you're gonna need one for that. The bait casters, right around $70 to $80. You get a decent entry level one, and for spinning, $30, $40. You get yourself a decent one, like entry level. Nothing you go to a little tournament with, but for the weekend angler, I think you'll be fine. Let's see. Oh, and those are the reels, right? So and then we got to talk about the rods. The rods, the main giveaway on the rods is the spinning rods have bigger rings on them, and they're always on the bottom of the rod when you're fishing, and there's usually 5 or 6 on, like, say, a 7-foot rod. On a bait caster, the rings are a lot smaller, and they're on the top. And there's usually 2 or 3 more, maybe 7 or 8 or 9 rings. And overall, from a general point of view, the spinning rods are more flexible. Okay, it's got a lot more flex in them. They're a lot more rubbery or spongy. As the bait cast rods, they're more stiff. They're designed to throw a much more heavier weight. You're talking like 3/8 to an ounce would be like a kind of a regular, like a medium heavy to heavy action baitcaster. Where on the spinning rod is more of like on the medium heavy and down. Okay, and on the fly fishing, you're talking about really light stuff. And in the fly fishing world, they don't talk about ounces anymore. They talk about line weights. So you like a 5 weight, a 6 weight, a 10, 12 weight. Like some of those big guys out in Florida, when they fish a fly rod, so it's a 12 weight rod. So, and the weight of the line, it actually dictates how heavy a lure or a fly can throw out. So that's kind of the gist of it. Let's go back into the reels, because I think I skipped over a little part. The reels, this is another important thing that a lot of people understand, is the gear ratios on the reels. Spinning reels, usually you'll get like anything between a 4.5 to a 5.7 gear ratio. Not super fast, but it does a job. On the bait casters, usually on a normal baitcaster lineup, you'd say somebody's going to offer something in the 5 up to almost the 7 range. And then yes, you're going to get those companies that have the 4.3s and the 8s and the 9-to-1 ratios. So there's options for gear ratios for the spinning and the bait casters. But when you look at the fly fishing, there are no gear ratios. You have a big old spool, and there's a knob on the side, and you just turn that knob. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So every time everybody tells you, I crank my spinning reel one time and it gets 30 inches of line, on a fly rod it's one crank and that might be 12 inches. So that's why when you're watching the videos, the guys are just cranking super fast on their reels and on the fly rods, and it's barely bringing any line. And that's why a lot of the guys actually prefer to just strip the line. It's a lot faster that way and just strip it. And you can control it with your finger. The drag is controlled by the little 2 fingers that are holding the line. It's actually a pretty cool experience if you've never had a fish pulling line past your fingers. So expenses, I think I covered that a little bit already. Talking to get started. Okay, this is the rod and reel combination together. It's gonna go spinning, it's cheapest, bait caster, and then the fly rods. Primarily because of the fly line. Fly line is very expensive. Bait casters, all the reels are kind of in the general area, and the rods are kind of in the general area too, until you get into the line. Fly line is like it's a one-time buy. You buy it one time and it's good forever. You change it out, but you keep it and then you spool it on later when you need it. So line is usually like $75 for, I think it's only 50 yards. And there's different types of lines too. The floating lines, sinking lines, tapered lines. I mean, it gets really complicated. I'm not even going to go into it because it's a whole topic into itself. But anyways, yeah, the line. So for a spool of like, say, mono, say 10-pound mono, regular brands like Berkeley, things like that, $10. You get, mono. Fluorocarbon, step it up to $20. Some FC Sniper or something like that. $20, 200 yards. Fly line, $70, 50 yards. And that's not even including the backing. So you have $30 for backing as well. So you're at like $100 with a line. And you don't have the tapered leader yet. So some people can tie their own tapered leaders, but say you just go out and buy them. Another, say, $5 for that. So you're looking at $100 just for the fishing line, just to get started. So that is going to set you back a lot farther with a fly fishing outfit. So anyways, let's talk lures for a second. Lures. The bait casters can handle the heaviest lures and the most drag because it's just because of the way they're designed. Well, I would say the most drag. On average, pretty good drag, but not the most. Bait casters can handle the most weight because of the way it's designed. The spool sits on top of the rod and it's anchored on 2 points. The spool itself is anchored on 2 points. So fundamentally, from a design perspective, the spool's not going to wobble on you under load. Now the spinning reel, it spins. If I'm holding it like this, it'll spin this way, right? And then when drag is being pulled, it'll actually flex the reel up. Same with a fly rod. So those two, they don't handle as much. I'm talking like regular reels. I'm not talking the high-end reels here, because on those they kind of figure those out, and then you're fine with those. Examples of this would be like if you're throwing a 6-inch Huddleston, one of those 4-ounce, 8-inch trouts. It is best on a spin. No, I didn't say spin. It is best on a bait caster. Okay, it's best on a bait caster. If you're throwing a crappie jig, it is best on a spinning reel. I mean, a small crappie jig. I'm talking like a 1/16 ounce crappie jig. Spinning gear is the way to go. If you're throwing a nymph, maybe some people don't know what nymph is, but nymph is basically a fly that's literally that size. I'm talking a 1/4 inch long, 1/2 inch long, okay? And it's just basically it's a hook with some yarn around it. That's a nymph. Okay, so that basically covers the what the reels do, what they are, rods, some of the things about it. But there's some other considerations you have to look at as well. One of the things I mentioned was environment and space. Okay, so if you have no wiggle room, meaning if you're fishing an area where it's like packed, one person after another, I refer to it as a Mo New Year sometimes, or honey holes and dams, things like that, striper runs, salmon runs, things like that, where everybody's lined up. Just literally, you don't even have 5 feet between you and the next guy. Yeah, that's when a spinning reel is going to come in the most handy, because most of the time, you're just going to do the overhand cast, jig, overhand cast, jig, or reeling things in. Keeps things simple, and that's going to be your best friend, keeping things simple. You could probably do it with a bait caster as well, but if you get a backlash, everyone's going to hate you, basically, because your line just drifted downriver and there's 10 other guys you just snagged up on. So not cool. Forget about the fly fishing. Fly fishing, you're just going to snag the guy right next to you. Not going to happen. On windy days do favor the spinning rod as well. I'm just going to say that right now because that's what I use. If it's blowing 15 miles per hour or faster, I'm on a spinning setup. I mean, that's just kind of what I figure. I know some guys are pretty good at the bait casters, and I'm pretty good at them too now, but if I can get away with a lure that I can tie onto a spinning rod, it's on a spinning rod. Let's see. Night fishing. Okay, for night fishing, hands down, it's a spinning rod. Because you can't see the lure. Usually when I fish on a bait caster, you flip it out and you watch the lure. As soon as the lure is about to touch the water, hold the thumb tight to the spool, shuts the spool down, and it prevents backlash. I run my spools very loose, so I have to do that. I know you can kind of feel it, but it's just not as good. It's almost like a visual thing for me, so I can't really control that good. Fly fishing at night, I've never done it before. I really recommend against it because fly fishing is very visual. It's almost like a stalking type of fishing where you kind of have to see structure or the way the water runs, and then you just cast to it. There's no like random, I'm just going to throw here, 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 and here. There's not a lot of like you walking on the shore and you're just going to spade cast an entire area. There's none of that. So nighttime fishing is just going to go to the spinning reel. Speed during your presentation, and this is where I think a fly rod takes over. Let me give you a certain situation. Like say we fish a lot of topwater action, right? So say you're kind of cruising on your boat, you're going down river or whatever, and then you see a blitz, but it's not like a centralized blitz. The blitz is running away, like all types of fish are chasing these bait fish. On the spinning reel and on the bait caster, you get one shot to get your lure within inches. The closer you get to this little moving blitz, the better you're off. But it's not always on the surface. Like they'll come up and then they'll dive by count. So if you're off, you have to reel it back in. And this is where your 9-to-1 gear ratio reel comes in really handy. But it still takes you, like 10 seconds to bring it in and cast it back out. You're talking max cast too, 50-yard casts, things like that. And even on a surf rod, it takes that long. But on a fly rod, if you're within range, and this is the big asterisk, if you're within range, say 30 yards, that is probably my maximum range. Maybe a little beyond 30 yards, my maximum range for a fly rod. You can bring that fly back and back out there 2 seconds. That's the advantage of the fly rod. So when you're chasing blitzing fish, the fly rod has the advantage. Big time advantage. Big advantage. Or when you're chasing cruising fish, big advantage again to the fly rod. Because as a fish is cruising, you can present. And if he ignores it, you can present again and again and again and again within seconds. And there's no... Oh, the other thing is there's no splash too. So for most of the times, a fly rod has a better presentation for that reason. If you're flipping, say like grass mats, things like that, you're gonna go with a bait caster, big bait caster, big line, get those fish out of the holes. This primarily pertains to bass fishermen. For the maximum range, if you want to cast, say from a dam or something, you're trying to hit some target that's like 100 yards away. That's gonna go. In my experience, that's going to go into a spinning rod because the bait casters, there's too much, in my opinion, because I'm not a super good baitcaster person. Because like I said, it's really hard to balance it out very well. I'm still gonna go with the spinning rod, like a proper setup, like a long range setup spinning rod. Small line, it won't get the job done. Um, but if you're really good, and I've seen some guys that are really good with a baitcaster, a long range baitcaster setup too. They cast them beyond us. So that, but that's kind of on a really small margin. So let's go into body strain. Okay, so say you're going out 8-hour fishing trip, and say you're supposed to make at least, I don't know, say a cast every 2 minutes, one cast every 2 minutes, or heck, one cast every 5 minutes. Okay, but it's an 8-hour trip and you're supposed to go out there. The spinning reel is probably gonna be your friend, generally speaking, because the spinning reel is gonna be the lightest one. The fly rod is probably the most kick in the butt you're gonna get, because it's a workout to throw a fly out and retrieve it back. We're talking like a 5 weight, and you're just going at it, because it's a lot of work. You'll feel like you did 30 push-ups and then like, yeah, you'll feel like you did 30 push-ups, and you'll feel it the next day. You'll feel it in your biceps and triceps and all that stuff, especially if you're not fit or if you haven't done it in a while. The fly fishing sensitivity, I think goes, without even no argument, it goes to the fly rod again. Primarily because a lot of people will tell you sensitivity in the rods. Sensitivity is in the rod. Not true, in my opinion. The sensitivity is in the fishing line. And in the bait casters, you're not holding the line, or you can, in the spinning reel you can, but on a fly rod you have to hold the line while you're moving the lure back. You're stripping it, so the fingers, these two fingers, are always in contact with the line. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, when you hook up on a fish and it's pulling fast, and you got like 30 yards of line here, kind of just floating downriver, and this fish is pulling and the line is screaming through your fingers, that by far is better than any reel clicking, like on a spinning reel, it'll click as it spins back, or on a baitcaster where you're trying to hold it with your finger and it's spinning. On this one, it's screaming through your fly rods, is screaming through your fingers, and you can see this whole mess just kind of jumping around, and it's kind of chaotic for a little bit, but it's like the best thing ever. Throw the fight once again goes to the fly rod. If you're out there for fun, if you're not really, say you don't care if you catch a lot of fish, or if you don't care if you need fish for the table, like needing fish for your family, feed your family is not a requirement for that trip, go out with a fly rod. It's going to be the best one. Primarily because, one, you're going to have fun because you're just casting like crazy. It's like an activity that you do out on the water, and it's not really like a hunting party where you have your mind so focused on I need to get something. Where fly rod is more of like it's just hit up all these targets, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But when it pays off, it's like, wow, the fish, it's a small fish, but it feels like a big fish because like I said, the line running through your fingers and everything, it's very thrilling. So from a thrilling perspective, the fly rod, hands down, it's going to be the funnest one to go. Let's see. Anything else? I don't know. If you guys have questions about this video, post them up on the comments below. Or go to Facebook and post them up on there. We'll answer anything you want. I know I skipped out a lot of things. There's 3 different things you have to cover. And like I said, it's just a very generalized thing that we get asked a lot. So if you're really into one thing and you're getting bored at it, that's one of the things too. We start off with spinning rods. We got so good at it that it got to the point where I kind of got bored with it. So I got into the fly fishing world for about a year, and I picked up those 2 rods. Haven't really caught much on because I just wasn't dedicated that year. And this year started, the last 2 years I've been picking up bait casters. And as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 bait cast reels. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spinning reels. The other 3 are on the ground, and I have 2 fly rods up there, a 5 and a 9 weight. I'm probably gonna get a 12 weight too, just to play with the stripers around here. But that's kind of what it is, guys. Questions is I don't know, post them up. Well, we will answer them.